Hey guys, welcome to today's episode, and our title is How to Debunk the Gut Myths and Figure Out How to Get Rid of the Bloat. We all want to get rid of it. You've all been bloated at one time, and we are going to solve that problem today. So welcome, Phoebe Lapine.
Thanks for having me.
So I will tell you guys a really cute story. Before I was ever planning to have Phoebe on, I was just on Amazon and looking for books. Her book is SIBO Made Simple. I did find out I had some SIBO, and so we'll be talking about that today. But I bought her book without even, I think she reached out to me to ask me to be on the podcast. I don't think I reached out. Did I reach out to you or you reached out to me?
No, I did. Yeah,
you reached out to me because I'm saying just so weird that timing. I think I bought your book and then you randomly reached out to me. I'm like, oh my gosh. So let's talk a little bit about, first, for people who don't know what SIBO is, let's really define it, figure out how you can figure out you have it, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So it stands for small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And I think kind of one of the first myths I'll bust about gut health is, I think sometimes when things get distilled into layman's terms, we talk a lot about, the good gut bacteria, bad gut bacteria. And what people don't realize is that primarily we're really talking about the large intestine. That's where kind of the majority of your gut microbiome lives. And while all the other areas of your digestive tract kind of have their own unique ecosystems, that's where the bulk of it is. And the small intestine is not really an organ that's designed to have, a huge population of bacteria. They don't really have a role in that leg of the digestive labyrinth. And what happens when, those numbers exceed their normal quota is that bacteria then starts competing for your food resources. It's where you absorb the majority of your nutrients. And when bacteria eats your food, they release gas, and that gas is now much further away from an exit ramp. So it tends to get trapped there, can lead to really uncomfortable distension and bloating. And of course, a host of other IBS symptoms, diarrhea, constipation, burping is a weird one because again, you're just the gas is trying to get out any way it can. So sometimes it takes the other exit ramp. And then, it can lead to leaky gut because of the damage that the bacteria actually cause to the integrity of the intestinal wall. And, once that happens, there's just a whole downwind string of autoimmune symptoms that people could experience. It's a really tricky kind of subset of IBS. There's research now that says over 60% of all IBS cases are actually being caused by SIBO. So it's important for people to kind of understand more about what it is and know that, sometimes the conventional gut health wisdom of eating fermented foods and, crushing legumes and fibrous seeds and nuts and taking probiotics, if you have kind of an acute issue like SIBO, those things could actually be making your symptoms worse.
So what causes you to have an abnormal, so SIBO is when you have an abnormal increase in the overall bacterial population in the small intestines. And what causes that? Give me some reasons of why all of a sudden you've got this abnormal increase in overall bacterial population.
Yeah, so it's not a disease. It's really just a sign that something has gone wrong in your digestive tract. Our body is a well-oiled machine. It is very well designed to neutralize, the bacteria that's coming in through our nose and mouth every single day and make sure that no pathogen kind of takes hold. So kind of one big bucket for why this would happen is just, the bacteria are not killed in the first place. So low stomach acid would be part of that matrix. Being immunocompromised, since your immune system, again, exists to ward off anything that's going to take hold. And Then the second bucket has to do with motility. So how this mechanism called the migrating motor complex works. And, I've been writing about health and food for a long time, and this was not something that I came across in my everyday research. It was really only something I learned about when I started to research SIBO. And so this is kind of your street sweeper wave that cleans up after a meal. And you'll be interested to know that it only kicks in during a fasting state of 90 minutes or more. So leaving time between meals to get it to kick in is really important. And there's been a lot of research that has uncovered that a lot of the reasons why people get SIBO is because of some malfunction or breakdown in this migrating motor complex. Because if you think about it, the small intestines is incredibly long and winding. There's a lot of opportunity for debris to kind of accumulate, or for an opportunist like bacteria or fungi/yeast to kind of pull off the highway and stay a while. And that migrating motor complex is primarily responsible for that not happening. So if it falls down on the job, and especially over time, a lot of that accumulation can mean, a backup of bacteria, and it could also mean, a backup of food debris. So giving that bacteria a really consistent food source.
What are the foods that you say, if you have SIBO or you think you might have it, that you say you have to stay away from the following foods? What would those be?
Well, it's really variable. I mean, if you don't react to something, absolutely eat it. But the main diet that gets kind of prescribed off the back end of treating SIBO, which is usually done with some sort of quote unquote kill protocol, so an antibiotic or an herbal antimicrobial, this diet's called the low FODMAP diet, and it is literally the opposite of what any gut scientist will tell you to do to foster, a healthy microbiome. And that's again because, these are your bacteria's favorite foods. So if you take them away, you're much less likely to have symptoms. It's not that you are trying to, starve the entire population. It's just a means of symptom control. So some of those foods include legumes, like I mentioned before. Garlic and onion are kind of the trickiest in the low FODMAP diet to stay away from, but they tend to be, kind of give people the most problems. Some other kind of healthy vegetables like cauliflower, can cause a lot of symptoms for people. And then like certain quantities of dairy. The low FODMAP diet is interesting because it's quantity specific. So it's harder to say like these are the hard and fast foods to absolutely eliminate, and more teaches you to kind of have certain problematic foods in moderation.
Hey guys, I really want you to join our intermittent fasting and OMAD Facebook group. We're doing tons of giveaways right now for posting your before and after pictures, and just for posting a question in there. We're giving away free protein shakes, some digest aid, all kinds of fun stuff. So please join our intermittent fasting and OMAD Facebook group. The link is in the show notes. Which it's so strange because for me personally, I know that when I eat a lot of garlic and onions, I feel great. So I don't feel bad when I eat garlic and onions. And when I eat cauliflower, I don't feel bad. Now, beans or dairy, I never feel good. Like if you gave me a bean, like I could eat one bean and like literally I would have so much bloat, it wouldn't even be funny. And dairy, I really try hard to not have dairy in my diet, but I will tell you it's very, very difficult. I never have gluten in my diet anymore. That's a very rare day that comes into my diet. But when it comes to dairy, I will somehow justify it in some form because I like it so much.
But that's a good example. Everyone's different, and ultimately being strict in any of these diets isn't necessarily going to rid you of SIBO. It's just going to make you feel better. So if something, doesn't cause any symptoms for you, keep it in. Kind of the biggest rule of gut health is to have as diverse a diet as possible, especially with all of the truly healthful plant foods and vegetables out there. So the bar should be high for taking anything out for good.
So I just got your book, so I haven't had a chance to make a lot of the recipes yet. So I want you to tell us first. The first question is, in your book, those recipes, do you not have garlic, onions, beans, cauliflower, or dairy? Are those not even in your book anywhere as the recipes?
Not in them at all.
Not in there. Okay. So that's completely
most people
out.
can't tell, it's still pretty vibrant. I think like one of the pitfalls of, kind of IBS or SIBO diets is just taking out so many plant foods, so many delicious vegetables, since for some people that can cause symptoms. And I really tried to, just prepare them in a way that was more easy to assimilate, like cooking them, pureeing them, adding lots of really supportive ingredients like fresh ginger and turmeric and all these other healing foods. But there's also like a lot of really delicious comfort food recipes. So I think most people will not notice that they are both low FODMAP and free of gluten, dairy, soy, and corn.
So tell me, what would you say that is your top 3 recipes that you have to make out of your book, that you're like, these are the 3 best?
Okay. There is this chicken tagine recipe, which is like a Moroccan stew, and it's got lots of incredible digestive spices in there. It's got lots of root vegetables for kind of like the fall, winter, and then really, in transitional weather, it's such a solid, delicious recipe. Then there's this so there's actually a lot of plant-based recipes in the book. I'd have to say there are these quinoa sweet potato burgers that are delicious. I feel like, when you take out garlic and onion, it just becomes so much harder to have any sort of prepared food shortcuts. And for me, like I always for lunch would like resort to a veggie burger like from the freezer. And so these are actually great for freezing ahead of time and making a quick, easy lunch. And then there's this green detox soup that is really, really, really delicious. People might not think so, just by looking at it, because it is a deep, vibrant green, but it's just a really simple mixture of zucchini, chard, and broth. And it's just incredibly anti-inflammatory and healing.
So for me personally, when I have a soy-free, gluten-free, corn-free, dairy-free, and refined sugar-free, that's how I feel like $1,000,000. And so I'm wondering of why I guess I might have to try it because I don't even know that I could not have garlic and onions. Like I put so much garlic and onions in everything. I literally don't even think I could imagine my life without it.
Well, I'm a chef, so I completely agree with you. I was very reliant on it. And I have to say, I can, eat out and tolerate garlic and onion fine now. I pretty much eat everything now besides gluten, but I don't miss it in my cooking at home. I think you kind of don't appreciate, how much other flavor powerhouses can do for you, like spices and just cooking your food properly, like searing your protein so that there's a lot of flavor development, and caramelizing certain vegetables. Doesn't have to be onion and garlic, can be bell pepper, can be carrots, can be a little bit of fennel. Yeah, it's really funny. It's more out of laziness than anything, is that I noticed I just didn't miss it that much, and my food didn't actually taste like any more deficient from it.
Hey guys, I'm so excited. My new book, One Meal and a Tasting, is out now. And if you order the book on Amazon, just the regular paperback edition, if you go in and make a review, you will get the audio book for free. Send a copy of your receipt to questions@chantelrayway.com and you'll get the audio book right away. So I'd like, since you are a chef, and to give us some really good tips. So if you said, okay, here's like kind of advanced, but if you said, here's kind of 5 advanced cooking tips that you can do to make your food taste better, give us those.
Okay. Well, I'll kind of expand upon some of the ones that I just told you. So, if you're using spices, and I highly recommend that you kind of slowly build out your spice rack, because you can just turn any one ingredient into, 5 different dishes and keep things exciting, which, especially on a limited diet, like a low FODMAP diet, you want to do, because you don't want to be eating like, carrots every single day. But you can eat carrots every single day if you have, the variety to flavor them in different ways, but never add spices directly to like a liquid broth. You always want to toast them in a hot pan. That can be, for normal people, normally cooking, like added to garlic and onion. But essentially, especially if you're starting with ground spices, you want to like kind of light that flavor on fire and, make it come alive, because it's already a little bit anemic to begin with. Most traditional cultures that really rely heavily on spices, like will toast the whole spices in a dry pan, then grind them, then add them to a recipe. So whenever you can add heat directly there and kind of create a little paste with some oil, that's great. Number 2, I guess this wouldn't necessarily apply to making your food taste amazing, but it's so important to me, is like using fats in the way that they're designed to be used. People talk about healthy fats all the time. And of course, there are like some junky fats out there, but ultimately a healthy fat, is really only as good as the cooking temperature that you cook it at. So olive oil is incredible. It's an amazing healthy fat, but, frying things in olive oil beyond its traditional burning temperature really does kind of denigrate the oil. So for high heat cooking, I rely on coconut oil, avocado oil, ghee, and I use olive oil for more low heat cooking and raw preparations. Let's see. Number 3. I mean, again, I have to say, if you're someone who, cooks a lot of protein, you can't be afraid of a hot pan and giving it a really good sear. I highly recommend, to make that easier, getting a cast iron skillet that you can just season over time. It requires, kind of less oil to make it nonstick. I mean, it's naturally nonstick if you take care of it properly. And because of its like heavy weight and the way it radiates heat, you won't be like smoking out your home or your apartment. And then getting that really beautiful color on your protein, like those are natural sugars developing. That is flavor, and that'll only add even more depth to whatever sauce you create off the back end. So like that tagine that I mentioned, having, the seared protein at the beginning is going to add so much depth to the sauce and the broth that comes right after.
So I read this book called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. Yes. Have you ever read that?
Yes, yeah. It's wonderful.
It is a great book, because it's, even if you don't read it, and when I say I read it, I skimmed it, but it was really about the fact that it's so good, because it's like when something doesn't taste right, it's so good because you go, okay, does it need more salt? Does it need fat? Does it need acid? Does it need heat? And so a friend of mine, I went over to her house, and I make an incredible spaghetti meat sauce. Everybody like goes nuts about it. It's not really that amazing, but somehow everybody just goes crazy, crazy. And it's pretty good. But so anyway, I tasted her meat sauce, and I'm like, okay, let's first add some salt. Mm-hmm. Then, even though she had meat in there, I added a little bit of olive oil for the fat. Mm-hmm. It already had a lot of acid because tomatoes are acidic. Mm-hmm. So it didn't need more acid. But then I add some crushed red pepper, and then I added a little bit of brown sugar to kind of, because tomatoes are so acidic that adding that sugar kind of balances it a little bit. And so adding those 4 ingredients just literally made it into night and day difference of what that was like.
I'd say most home cooks try adding salt first. Like, you don't realize restaurants how much salt is added. Yes. And then people at home are like, why does my food taste dull? And, there's nothing, people are afraid of sodium, but if you get, really great sea salts or pink Himalayan salts. There's a lot of minerals and nutrients in there too. So if you start with good ingredients, you shouldn't be kind of afraid of adding more.
Yeah. And, using non-iodized salt, like you said, is so, so important. I don't like to have it in our house really at all. But, you want to taste the saltiness after it's dissolved too, because a lot of people will put it in there and then it hasn't had a chance. And then they just keep putting more and then they might put more. But I think salt reduces bitterness too.
Yeah, definitely.
So what other tips would you say? So number one, obviously we want diet. We've got to get your book. We got to get some of these going. But what other things do you suggest if someone thinks they do have SIBO?
Yeah. So I think meal spacing really is key. A lot of people do intermittent fasting. But in thinking about the migrating motor complex, just making sure that even during like your eating window, that you're not constantly snacking, even on something really healthy, like an almond or a carrot stick every 30 minutes. If you think about it, your migrating motor complex is just not going to kick into gear in the same way as if you leave yourself, 3 to 4 hours between meals. And, per intermittent fasting and the lessons in that, I would also say eating earlier before bedtime is so important because, our digestive system slows down at night. And if you eat too close to bedtime and you have that food just still sitting in your intestines when you go horizontal, that's, going to create more of a, of a breeding ground for SIBO. I think for ladies, not wearing tight pants all of the time, especially if you notice that you have digestive issues, I can't tell you how many times I've been like racking my brain for what I've eaten at a certain meal and being like, what ingredients set me off? And then having the conclusion like a few weeks later after repeat experiences that it was actually like the pants I was wearing that was causing the issues, just compressing your intestines in a way that, turns a 4-lane highway into a 2-lane highway. Hydration, I think, is super important for everything involving your bowels, especially if you have IBS issues, and you're not going to the bathroom in an optimal way, either drinking more to kind of grease the wheels of your digestive system or drinking more because of the liquids you're losing in the toilet is so important. Let's see, what else? Chewing your food. Oh yes, the most basic. I think that's the one that most people forget about. And if you just make one change tomorrow, just like focus on it for a week, if you add time onto your meal by making sure to chew every bite into liquid, I guarantee that your symptoms will be partially improved.
Hey guys, I'd love for you guys to listen to a podcast that we did about the side effects from wine and the differences between natural wine and traditional wine. So go to chantelrayway.com/wine and you'll see transcripts, you'll see some different episodes. But here's the thing, you can get your penny bottle now of dry farm wines and make the decision that if you're going to have wine, to make sure you have the most natural, healthy wine in the world with no additives, only natural ingredients. All the other wines out there have so much sulfate, so much sugar. Why put that poison in your body? So get your penny bottle now at chantelrayway.com/wine. Yeah, I also want you to talk a little bit about you had originally talked about your stomach acid being low, and that's a major problem. How do you increase your stomach acid? What are some tips to do that?
Yeah, so you can do it with supplementation. So with an HCl pepsin supplement, and there's kind of a trick to leveling up, figuring out what kind of your optimal dose is. And you can just take one pill. They're all kind of calibrated differently depending on the brand, and see what it does for you. And then at the next meal, maybe you take 2 and see what that does for you. And you kind of can find your perfect little tipping point before you start to get any reflux symptoms. But that would be number one. And then if you don't want to actually go the supplement route, you can just dissolve a little bit of apple cider vinegar or lemon juice in some water and drink that 15 minutes before a meal. And that just kind of gets things churning. I will also say the gut-brain connection is so important when it comes to stomach acid, making sure that you're really dropped into your rest and digest mode, which then, will kind of signal to the rest of your digestive system downstream that it's time to get that stomach acid churning. It's time to, get those digestive enzymes pumping into the small intestine. So I think actually, sitting down before a meal, you don't have to say grace, but having some sort of transitional moment to just drop in and ground yourself and, mentally prepare for what you're about to do. That can be really good for your stomach acid as well.
So one of my worst qualities is slowing down and chewing my food. And so it's awful. And it's gotten a lot better, but it's not where it needs to be. And so I have to remind myself of all the benefits of it. So I constantly say to myself, okay, Chantel, number one, you're going to absorb more nutrients and energy from your food. You're going to be able to eat less.
Yep.
Your food gets more exposure to your saliva, which it needs to for digestion. And easier digestion leads to less bloat and less excess bacteria lingering in your intestines. So it's almost like a self-talk that you have to do with yourself to say, it's so important. And I don't think people really understand how important it is. And so it's like, listening to podcasts like this to saying, okay, like chewing your food 30 times before swallowing is painful for me to do. It's so hard to do, but it's one of those things that if you constantly keep listening to these reminders and, taking some deep breaths and putting your fork down and smelling your food, like smelling your food, they say actually switches your salivary glands and gets your stomach ready for the meal that you're going to enjoy.
That's why cooking is, part of the equation. You're tasting, you're smelling, you're kind of preparing yourself in small little ways.
Well, this has been amazing. Tell listeners where they can find you and where they can follow you.
Yes. So my website's feedmephoebe.com. You can find tons of free recipes and SIBO resources there. Also linked to my podcast, which is also called SIBO Made Simple. And then for the SIBO Made Simple book, you can go to SIBOMadeSimple.com. And I also have a course and my last book, which is all about Hashimoto's thyroiditis. That's at thewellnessproject.com.
Love it. Well, thanks so much for being with us, and you stay tuned. We've got another episode coming up in just a few. Bye-bye for now.